Okay, hey there, students. So welcome to week two. You have a few things in module one that are due today. We usually have Monday due dates for a lot of assignments. So make sure you get in any module one activities that you're still working on. Um, and please remember to continue to review these announcements and watch for them. And especially these overviews because I'm trying to give you some tips. So I'm going to try to make this video 10 minutes or less as we dive into the work this week. And this is an intense week. This is a week where we're doing a lot of resource gathering and we're starting to kind of put the information from that research into some different boxes of assignments that help us to organize that information that we'll end up using later to help write a longer essay. So let's dive into the work that you have this week. So looking into this, we're in module two, and you can see here that there's a lot of stuff, right, due in 1 week, right, on March 31st. And my biggest piece of advice this week is to not sleep on the amount of work that it's going to take you this week. I noted that you want to make sure you set aside at least 6 hours a week to work on our course. This week's going to take 6 hours of your time at a minimum. Because there, especially if you struggle with finding some sources that you might want to use. So just try to develop a good schedule for yourself and then move forward. Now, move forward one step at a time, most importantly. Now, the start of each module, right, we have some information related to the objectives of this module. This module, most importantly, has a research proposal. This is what you are proposing to research that is related to one of your research questions that you are working on in module one. And the proposal itself has a few different elements that you'll be completing and building this week. And then these are some of the objectives related to just, meeting some of our course goals. As every week, we have some learning activities. Before we dive into trying to write some stuff and use our research, we need to spend some time thinking about what these materials look like and some of the skills that we want to utilize in producing those graded assignments later. So you have here some links to some textbook chapters for us that will help you to think about literature reviews, most importantly here for the research proposal. And then we have some elements here related to helping us in the module two section, this space right here, that are going to help us think about how we bring information into our writing. Some really good nuts and bolts information and discussion there. Okay, so you want to make sure that you read and go through all of these subchapter materials. And then note here that we have a link to our research proposal instructions, which will be important for us to return to. But we also have a sample research proposal, so you can get an idea of what the final product might look like, and that will help you. Now, last week, we talked a little bit about differences between primary and secondary sources, where I noted that we would be talking about those. And here is where we dive in a little bit more fully, where we're going to go into what is a primary source, what's a secondary source. Most things we engage with are secondary sources, and then what's a tertiary source. So you'll watch this. It's not super long, but it's going to really help you understand the differences between the source types. And then we have a couple of things to submit this week. Of course, we have the larger research proposal, but then we have this synthesis grid. Now, the synthesis grid is going to ask us to break down the sources that we're using and note a couple of different things about them. Synthesis is just the ways in which we're reviewing multiple sources and thinking of the ways in which those sources seem to agree or disagree with one another. The synthesis grid helps us kind of visualize that and type in some information for us. So that's going to help you. Giving you here some additional questions to think about. And then, of course, we continue to have these links to synthesis grid support. Like here's a sample synthesis grid. We have a discussion board post this week here. So by Sunday, you want to think about, here's your initial post assignment description. You want to think about one of the research questions that you listed in your possible research questions. last week, and think about that question, right? Revise it if needed based on the feedback you received from me or from your peers, and that you might receive if you haven't, if you just submitted this yesterday, or you've submitted it late for some reason and you're submitting it today. So watch for some feedback from me on that if that I might give you if I feel like your questions are off or I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Look for that early this week and let me know if you have any questions about it. But then we have this request here to find 2 more sources that are going to offer you some information about that particular question. So give you the advice of using opposing viewpoints in context, but I also want to just encourage the use, and we'll go into the tools and resources area here just to remind you of another database I really like. In our MyIV tools, you have a library link. Here, we'll just look at the statewide library. In A to Z resources, we have Academic Search Complete, which used to be called, I think, Academic Search Premier. It's an EBSCOhost database, but I really like it. If it's not available right here for you, you can go to A to Z resources to find it. And you can click full text. You can even click peer reviewed here to make sure that you're getting the absolute best sources possible. And here's where you're going to highlight some key terms, like maybe your research question relates to, a climate change question, a global warming question, and maybe you're interested in what are the best alternative fuels, or maybe you're doing a farming question and you're asking, what is more effective at feeding people, organic farming methods or conventional farming methods. And what you want to do is you'll just start typing in key terms, right? And sometimes you'll even get like this that'll help you out for key terms. And hey, look, we got 6 sources here that might work. And that's great, right? So you can just start playing around with different search terms. And remember also that you have chat with the librarian, and the librarians can help you find sources too. So if you get really stuck and you're like, gosh, I'm just not finding any sources I like, librarians are here to help you. Okay. So there's that. So you're going to find 2 more sources, give us a quick little summary of them, and look at the abstracts that the sources have provided. That's where the authors are giving you already the their own summary of their writing. It's a great place to check. And then we start to ask some questions about that source type, right? If it's not a peer-reviewed journal article, well, what is it? Is it a newspaper article? Is it from magazines, from a book? That kind of thing. So we start to fill out some questions about it. And then you'll respond to one of your peers sometime this week as well. And there are some questions here to help you as you think about responding to a peer. So we've already got AJ in there doing some work, which is great. But you should also see, right, so you can see here that you can see the rubric. There's a piece of information from there as a student for looking at it from my perspective as the instructor, it might look a little bit different, but you can see here how I grade this, right? So whenever I go in and grade, I'm clicking on these criteria based on the descriptions here and based on how your work is aligning or not with what we have. So always check out the rubrics if you're curious about, well, how am I going to get graded on this? And then work to try to, to reach this advanced level to get all the points. Okay, now for a bigger assignment, right? That's for 35 points this week. We have the synthesis grid, and this is where you're going to take, the sources that you were finding for the discussion, maybe sources you were finding last week, for 4 total sources, and they should be secondary sources. Though if you have a primary source that you've discovered, you can include that too. But likely most of these will be secondary sources. And you'll end up filling out the synthesis grid. So you'll need to download this blank synthesis grid. Looks like this, okay? And you'll end up writing the author's name, what kind of source is it, what's the title, what does it address, provide a useful quote maybe from it, and then think about its bias or potential fallacies that it might have, and note those here, right? So it's just a grid. It's helping us to organize the information that we have. Then here we have a sample one for you, right? So, to help to make sure that you earn as many points as you can, look at this sample, and you can kind of get an idea of what it should look like whenever you're done. Now, lastly, and I'm trying to go a little faster to not take too much of your time. Might have just heard my daughter call for our dog, Sprinkles, which is funny. But we've got a document that's going to ask you that will ultimately be a few pages long because of how we're organizing it. And you're going to be submitting that research proposal. Now, the instructions for it, okay, are linked here. Okay, we have the all the steps, all the information that we need in order to move through with drafting it. You'll be using the synthesis grid that's going to help you this week to think about this research proposal. You're going to be reading through sources that you find about it, and you're going to be working to build this proposal out for me. And so you can see here that these, for the drafting piece, right, you're going to organize this on the page. You're going to use section headings. So you're going to, this isn't like a typical essay with like introduction, body, conclusion. You're not doing that. You're building a proposal. And so you're going to have, a heading that will say the definition of the topic or rationale. And then here's where you're going to describe the issue and the problem. You're going to do that in a couple paragraphs, and finish out that section, or a paragraph or 2 or 3, however long it takes you. New section, right? You'll enter down and you'll have a new heading, review of preliminary research. You'll type that out, bold that on your screen. And then you'll start to go through and provide that literature review aspect, which you'll learn about, what a literature review is this week in your learning materials, and where you're going to start to list out some of the sources that you've found and say a little things about, share a few things about them. Enter down, guiding research question, right? So you're just going to follow through this step by step. And this is where it takes time, right? I told you this week is going to gobble, if you're going to do well this week's going to gobble up your 6 hours for sure. And it might take you longer than that. So you have to plan accordingly. But that is that's the big push this week. But it all comes back to those sources, to finding those sources related to your topic, your area of interest, the sources that you're finding through opposing viewpoints, through Academic Search Complete, through other databases that you might explore, through the A to Z resources, through sources that the librarians might provide you. You want to start with that. So to end this video, this overview video, and this little lecture content, here's what I would suggest you do this week. So number one, make sure that you submit any work that's due today that you might not have submitted already, right? So you've got some things here, right? Look at all these March 24th dates, and I know not all of you have submitted this. So do that first. Then transition to module 2 and start and move through these learning activities first. Read through all that chapter material. Do that on a day, right? And then the next day, find some sources, dive into these databases, start reading those sources, reading them critically, taking notes, annotating them as best you can, and then start working to build out your discussion, the synthesis grid as you're finding those sources, and then finally that research proposal. So don't try to do all this in one day. It's going to be really painful if you do that. At a minimum, break this up over 2 days with 2 focus sessions for you. And my advice would be to try to break this up over 3 or 4 days if you can. I know not all of you can because of your schedules, but that's going to feel best if you can do it that way. So 1 step at a time, follow that path. Email me immediately when you have questions so I can respond to you, and try your best this week to push forward, understanding that all the work you're doing right now is going to serve you and help you as we start to write an actual essay later in this class. Okay, thanks so much for your time. I'm wishing you all the best out there. I hope you had a good, restful weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do this week. So take good care.